Right now on UpFront.
Washington comes to Wisconsin.
One of the biggest challenges that we have is not the Lions and the Vikings. It's the Chinese Communist Party.
The bipartisan House Select Committee on China with a field hearing in Stoughton, just as the U.S. Commerce Secretary wraps up her high-profile trip to China.
Did she issue affirmative warning in your mind? Our guest this Sunday, the committee's chairman, Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher from Green Bay, ranking member, Democrat Roger Krishnamoorthi from Illinois. China's threat calls for Congress to act, and Gallagher on the GOP presidential field and former President Donald Trump.
Then, shadows of 2020.
Where is Ms. Wolf to talk about all of the great things that she has done?
Senate Republicans moving closer to potentially firing the state's top election chief. The Attorney General saying they don't have the authority. And what's next? Even more uncertain. Wisconsin Elections Commission Chair Don Millis is here.
And the GOP's new tax plan. High drama on the high court. The First Lady in Wisconsin looking ahead to a busy September with J.R. Ross.
This is UpFront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Congress returns to Washington this week after the August recess.
The U.S. Senate is back in session Tuesday and the House next week. There's urgency on a number of fronts, including spending bills and a looming government shutdown. All this as the Select Committee on China works toward a bipartisan package targeting the Chinese Communist Party. And that work includes a hearing right here in Wisconsin led by Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher.
And then ships the product along to the U.S. at a 30% lower cost.
At Stoughton Trailers just outside of Madison, Wisconsin Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher bringing the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party to Wisconsin.
Far from the think tanks in D.C. where jobs and factories are often just numbers.
The bipartisan committee, which Gallagher is chairman, discussing what it calls China's growing threats targeting U.S. manufacturers. The hearing coming just as Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo wraps up her trip to China, and that's where our conversation begins. Did she issue affirmative warning in your mind?
I don't know exactly what she said. I've also seen her saying things like, you know, a growing Chinese economy is good for the world, that the president tells her that they want a better economic relationship.
And you disagree with that?
I saw, well, if the growing Chinese economy fuels China's war machine, or if American money continues to flow into Chinese military companies, as our bipartisan investigation on this committee has revealed, that's not good for world peace and stability, because the risks of China kicking off a war by trying to invade Taiwan are increasing, and one thing we could do to slow that down is make sure that we're not contributing American dollars to the dilemma.
You wrote in the Washington Post this past week that the U.S. is literally funding our own political destruction, saying it's up to Congress to erect strong, enduring guardrails. Is that going to happen?
I think so. I think we have an opportunity. Now, the Biden administration released an executive order on this issue. I think it was a positive step forward. It didn't go far enough. It has a lot of loopholes. And I think we can actually legislate a solution to this in a bipartisan fashion that prevents us from funding key national security sectors in China and thereby subsidizing our own destruction.
It may be one thing to have agreement on this committee with Democrats, but when you look to the House and then to the Senate, that's a tougher sell.
Well, yeah, the Senate is always the problem. Maybe I'm an optimist. I'm cautiously optimistic we can hammer out an agreement. Again, the investigation that we launched with my ranking member, Raja Krishnamoorthi, a Democrat from California, was bipartisan. So I know he shares the same concerns. We may not yet have agreement on the right solution, but given that the Biden administration has at least conceded the principle that there should be guardrails on the outflow of U.S. capital to China, I think it's just a question of how do we build those guardrails in the right way?
I want to ask about 2024 because what happens next year is going to have a huge impact on what you're trying to do. On the debate stage in Milwaukee last week, you said they did not discuss China enough. Was there any candidate on that stage, or is there any candidate on that stage who most closely aligns with your view on this?
Well, thus far, DeSantis has talked the most about it. He unveiled his a comprehensive economic plan that was really framed as a way to counter CCP economic aggression. I thought that was quite good. Nikki Haley was quite strong. She gave a speech on China at AEI as well. That was good. And so those are the two candidates thus far that have talked the most about it, at least from what I've seen.
How about Ramaswamy? Does his recent comments on Taiwan and China, does that concern you at all?
Well, obviously, I disagree that our interests in Taiwan are reduced to semiconductors solely.
Is that your takeaway from what he has said?
Well, I think he said that, yeah, we would once we achieve semiconductor independence, we'd no longer have an interest in Taiwan, or something to that effect. We wouldn't defend Taiwan. Yeah, I would advise against that. I don't think we want to set a date certain for when we would or would not defend Taiwan.
What happens if Trump is the nominee coming out of Milwaukee?
I don't know. Either him or Biden will win. We'll have a brutal political presidential cycle in 2024. What happens in Wisconsin, I don't know. I mean, it'll be close.
Will you vote for Trump if he's the nominee?
Well, obviously I prefer someone younger to be the nominee. So we'll see where it goes with the nomination. I want to see that we have the strongest candidate. I intend to support the nominee. I'm certainly not voting for Biden.
So you're not really not voting for Trump?
Well, again, I've said that I want someone else to be the Republican nominee right now, someone younger who I think could actually carry on some of the Trump policies on China in a way. But I have a no-boomer policy right now, so no boomers for nominees.
Are you endorsing? Is it a DeSantis?
I'm not endorsing yet, but I'm just eager to see who the strongest candidate that emerges from this is.
What would a second Trump presidency look like on China?
That I don't know, because the Trump administration was divided on China. There were those, like his Treasury Secretary, who had a more dovish position on China, and then there were more hawkish people like Matt Pottinger and H.R. McMaster, who I think had a very good set of policies on China. And so it was often 2 steps forward, 1 3/4 steps back on China. Now, Trump deserves credit for reframing the narrative on China, for being willing to talk about China's economic aggression in very clear terms. So I give him credit for that, but I would hope that we have a strong set of policies. Where the previous administration didn't do enough was on the issue that we talked about before, which is capital outflows to China. That increased by about $750 billion over the course of the Trump administration, more than any 4-year period in American history. So that's an area of improvement.
All right, let's bring in your counterpart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with that, the Select Committee's ranking member, Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy from Illinois, joins our conversation. Do you think the Biden administration is being tough enough on China, especially coming off the visit this past week from the Commerce Secretary?
I think so. I think that it's a mixture of, trying to protect our values, protect our interests, and at the same time, engage where we can. So I'm glad that the fentanyl working group is starting up again. I'm glad that, we're starting to deal with some other issues in a constructive fashion. But at the end of the day, the Chinese Communist Party needs to curb its aggression, militarily and economically.
Let's say Democrats take the House in 2024. Does this committee continue?
That's a dystopian future. That.
I mean,
I like where you're going. Please.
We're talking about the need for this committee. But
what else is in your crystal ball?
Does it continue?
Justin Fields surviving one season.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Bears win the NFC North, and Democrats take the House. Oh my gosh.
Do you see Democrats seeing the importance of this?
I do. Yeah, I think that at first. Honestly, I think that there might have been concerns that, perhaps this committee was going to be used as a vehicle for kind of talking points about the administration. But thanks to Mike's leadership and kind of the way that we've conducted ourselves, we've made it a productive vehicle where a lot of different points of view, have a place to have an audience. And I think the interesting thing is, even within our within our committee and on both sides, there are some interesting differences of opinion that have emerged, which is healthy, because we don't want to have groupthink. We want to have an honest debate with everybody kind of trying to achieve the same mission, which is protect our values and interests, grow our economy, and protect our workers.
I'm getting the look. One final question. Is a TikTok ban going to pass? Is anything coming of that in the coming months?
Well, I would say hopefully.
Realistically?
There's a lot of work we got to do. I think what we're trying to do right now, working with the other committees, is come up with a framework that not only has buy-in from most House Republicans, but could potentially have bipartisan buy-in. But no doubt, I mean, it's gotten more difficult in recent months, but I don't think we've seen the last of the issue.
It'd be interesting to see what happens when lawmakers return to session.